Make it 10 o'clock.
That's fine.
You're sorted now?
This is odd.
Right.
Yeah.
Welcome, Dean. Welcome, Paul. Sorry. Dean, introduce you.
And Dom as well. Yeah.
Dom. Okay. Take it away. We've got half an hour.
Great. Yep. Charles, make a start. Yeah. Well, thank you for having me again. I'll just keep today relatively brief and happy to do more Q&A. But I thought I'd just start in terms of just reviewing. We started the process in 2018, more so to effectively emphasise that commitment to the project. We were part of a competitive process. I think circa 20 submissions were made, and obviously the successful proponent for the project. DA was signed in 2019. Obviously, binding contract was signed shortly thereafter. And fast forward, we're sort of our commitment to the project is unwavering. We've continued to work, methodically through the project as we typically do. A project of this scale, it's a 15-year job. It takes time to set everything up appropriately. So, very much being governed by, the terms as agreed with the DA kind of thing. So just in terms of where we are today, I just think it's a good segue. I just want to introduce you to both Dom Fleischl, who's next to me, and Jack Jolly, who's hopefully on the call. I can't see him there, but nonetheless, he's with Merrick's Capital. I think, for me, it's just emphasising our commitment to the job and the hard work we've done, and that very much judge us by our actions, not necessarily our words. So we are working through the pre-settlement conditions, working towards settling the land before the end of the year. Pretty happy with where we are in terms of obviously commitment on the finance. The project has enough sufficient pre-sales to move forward to construction. We've got a lender out of Australia, who Jack will be on the call I can introduce you to shortly, who's obviously comfortable enough to continue and effectively fund not only this stage, but obviously all future stages for the project. They're very comfortable with, I guess, the status of the project and also the level of pre-sales, and obviously Dom as a builder with CMP, who've been around since, I think, the late 80s, probably. Very much a national builder today, sort of turning over circa $200 million and, very much committed to the project. So today, I think it's all positive in the sense that we are moving towards the next phase of construction, gearing up to commence construction, gearing up to settle land before the end of the year. So happy to field any questions and do my best to answer them.
Dean, you got anything to add? Before I put it up? You can say nothing if you want.
Well, I mean, I've sat here with advisors in the past, and then when Dean's put his team on, we've been here with architects and the like, and those people that hold pens and put stuff on paper. But Dom here, obviously with the construction side, and meeting Jack as well, who's prepared to put up the money to pay for it. I think whatever value people see that land in its current form, whatever that value is, whether it's a valuer who does a desktop exercise, or whether it's somebody else in the community that sees that piece of land and has a vision for it, or how they value it. None of it really matters until you're actually standing in it and it's an actual product. So it's really important, I think, to have the likes of Dom here who know how to tie steel and pour concrete and actually create something that you can stand in. And then I was up on the site with Jack last month, and it was really good to hear that they have quite a large investor base and plenty of capital, and they're not only looking at the first stage, they've actually got a vision for the whole site. So I think that's just an exciting thing for me to be part of.
Yeah, I think Merrick's sort of managed circa $3 billion out of Australia and New Zealand. They're recently acquired by a group out of the US called Regal, obviously to sort of show the commitment to continuing to move forward on the project. We've successfully finished, and I think interestingly, when we did the deal with council, with you in 2019, you're obviously confident and comfortable with us then and our capability and our skill set. Fast forward 5 or 6 years, we've now delivered a project in Auckland, the largest hotel in the country, arguably I think the best hotel in the country, both with Merrick's, not with CMP, but certainly with Merrick's as a lender. So we've successfully delivered a project in this environment, and a challenging environment. Auckland's very difficult. The last 4 or 5 years continues to be difficult. So in terms of our skill set, at the time of signing the DA versus today, we've got the real live example, live experience in the New Zealand market. We've delivered a 46 odd story hotel. So and Merrick's with a lender on that project, obviously lending across New Zealand, not just on our job, but obviously are comfortable to continue that relationship with us moving forward across Queenstown, for which this market they're very, very comfortable with. It's obviously significantly better than that of Auckland.
Good, Jack.
Jack's just joined.
Jack's
yeah.
joined us.
So Jack's the director at Merrick's Capital.
Hi everyone, how are you?
Hey, Jack.
Right, I've got a question. So
Yeah,
straight to it.
thanks for that. Just you went through it really quickly here. Just a wee bit more on the connection with CMP and Jack. Just you gave a real brief one. I just wanted to understand a little more understanding of.
Sure.
And also, I know it's very hard to get timelines, but just a bit of an indicator. You can say, oh, yeah, we'll do this and this, and how. You also mentioned how pre-sales are going pretty well. So you went through it really quickly. I just wanted to spend a wee bit slower time just so we can get a good understanding of your relationships with the other active.
No problem. Yeah, so I'll just start with the easy one. From a pre-sale perspective, we're comfortable, and the lender is comfortable with the level of pre-sales we have to date in terms of binding conforming sales to fund the project. That's the most important thing. Without that, we've got nothing. So Jack and Merrick's are comfortable with that status. So the job from a lender's perspective, they're comfortable. So they're a private lender out of Australia and New Zealand. Dom's, and he can talk for himself in a moment, he's with a contractor called CMP, traditionally out of Auckland, but obviously got a national business. Hope you don't mind me saying it. His father-in-law, Ron McRae's been around a long time. You know, the business has been going since 1988. So he's our independent third-party contractor. We've signed a building contract, CMP. They're the preferred contractor on the project, obviously, and the lender is Merrick's Capital, of which Jack is the director.
Okay, so you got the finance side and the contract signed with
Yep.
CMP as a lead contractor.
Correct.
Okay, that's cool. Thank you.
Yeah, so we've actually taken it further. We've got a building contract signed with the lender, and so with the builder, and we've obviously got 2 building consents already approved and consented, with the builder managing the process with council.
Are we able to hear a bit about how you see it all?
Yeah, sure. So CMP been around since '88. We've currently got projects, most regions in New Zealand, Auckland, Taupō, Waikato, Wellington, Christchurch, and a reasonably strong pipeline down here. So we've been involved in the project for coming up a year, September. We've had a project director full-time engaged since November last year. So on the building side, various management plans have been submitted to the council department responsible for that. Construction management plan, traffic management plan, environmental management plan.
Induction, iwi,
we've covered off the iwi induction with Otahu. So a lot of those pre-commencement on the building side, closing out resource consent conditions has all been ticked off. We've done a huge amount of work on the methodology and the staging of the work. We're digging back into the hill there, anchoring the hill. So we've got, pages and pages of methodology and sequencing and how the traffic's all going to operate around the area. We've progressed the design as we would on any normal project. We're starting on the ground, and often, all of our projects, in fact, there is a stage consenting strategy whereby the first consent spits out, the job starts, and the remaining consents are then, or remaining work is then designed through that process, which is how all of our projects are operating. So we've got those initial consents in terms of the bulk excavation. There's 15,000 cubic metres of spoil to come out, 12,000 plus 3,000 of schist. So that in itself is a project of 7 to 9 months. And the way we dig the hill down and bench it to get to that basically RL for the foundation level, where we then have the consents for the crane-based foundations, and we're also utilising the crane-based piles, building piles as well, which we often do. It saves the developer money because obviously crane bases are not cheap. So if you can use those building piles as crane-based piles, you can get quite good efficiency there. And then also allow the rig to continue on site. So that the idea being that when we're pouring crane-based piles, if we were to start in the next month, we got that 9-month runway of work, with the idea being that the crane base, when they get poured, we then have the first substructure consents coming out, so that piling rig just stays on site and just keeps on working its way around. So, yeah, I mean, we're a building company, we're not involved in all the politics, but from the building side, we're ready to go. We've got a team assigned to it, we've got engagement with local subcontractors and suppliers, and we've put a huge amount of work into it for when the time is ready. We'll be up there the next day, putting a hoarding up and dropping sheds up there. So, but yeah, like I said, we're a national builder. We've worked down here in the past. We've got projects down the road in Franklin, so we're pretty comfortable with our ability to deliver. We've been delivering since 1988, so there's no issue there.
Two more quick questions then, just sorry to get out of the noise, but just my interest, where are we going to take the film?
We've got a couple of options. I'd rather not say.
Okay. The other question then is, we had on the table.
We've got a couple of options, yeah.
Yeah, we had on the table, the one thing was the stormwater. We were waiting to see, I think, understand with council, and where you're at your stage of planning, is that stormwater proposal, what needs to be done with stormwater identified yet or not?
I think, yeah, I mean, we're still working through that with Parks and Reserves team, but effectively you just got to view them as isolated, independent of one another. They're not predicated on one being done. I think it's more a risk for us as developer if we commence work and we don't have essential services at completion. Yes, it's part of their scope of work, but it's an independent stream of work that isn't predicated on one or the other. So,
Okay,
but to answer your question, we're still working through that. It's not as easy as we initially envisaged, but nonetheless, we're committed to a solution with council and we'll get there eventually, and we are working with Parks to do that.
Thank you.
In short, Lyle, from our perspective on that, we're representing the corporate side, the regulatory side, have a different sort of line of command in that, and so we've got to let the developer, as any other developer in the district, would progress their consents and all the necessary ducks in a row, let's say, in order to get to the next stage.
Thank you.
But that's up to these guys.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. So you mentioned you got 2 building consents, so they're already issued consents, and what do they cover the substructural foundations, or are they both substructure?
Yeah, right. Well, the first is major the civil works, the earthworks, and then the next one is the structural work.
Okay. And you mentioned, when you're ready to go, you'll be up there pretty quickly. Have you got a date in mind when you are going to start on site?
I guess it's off the back of obviously settlement and things of that nature. So I think the DA stipulates we need to be on site within 20 days, and we're comfortable we can achieve that one post settlement.
And do we have a date in mind for when that settlement is likely to occur?
I think we're working certainly before the end of the year. So I think we're sort of hopefully soon.
An actual date here.
No, I mean, it's just a commercial process that we're going through between the parties.
Because you've got a few other things to...
Well, there were a whole lot of maybe settlement conditions that were negotiated in 2019, and we're just methodically working our way through each of those. I mean, it's not as easy like ticking a few boxes. So there's a lot there, and yeah, we're hopeful we'll be there shortly, but certainly before the end of the year, it's the intention to settle and be on site as well before the end of the year.
Given it's marginal at the moment, there's just some finer points that we're just working through. It's mainly around consenting.
Right.
So our view at the moment, from a DA perspective, is there's a little bit more work to be done to work through that and provide that level. It's just really having that assurance, because all those settlement conditions were put in place to make sure that we didn't have a land banking situation or a situation where you have a stop in the middle of it. I don't think anyone here wants it to stop sort of along the way, on the way through. And we set a fairly strong bar for settlement to ensure that everything was in place. And again, like having people like Don and Jack here is helpful for that. But we just need to make sure everything is in line and do our due diligence in the background before we settle.
Is one of those conditions related to the consent for the superstructure as well, or does that doesn't fall part of the pre-settlement conditions? Obviously, we've only got building consents for earthworks and foundations at this stage, but is that enough to satisfy that part of it?
Yeah, we're working through that. There's the finances as well.
And the other question I had was design team. Is the design team part of a design and build contract, or are you engaging them separately from the construction contract?
We typically engage them separately, but obviously with the builder in the room, it's progressive to about 60 or 70%, maybe 80% in New Zealand, and then, but obviously the build is part of the process. We'd like to keep them in the room. They obviously have the best view of how things should be built, so it doesn't make sense isolating them from the conversation. So they're in the tent, but we'll effectively be managing that.
So it's not necessarily a design and build contract, but it's a
hand
collaboration.
At 80%, we then hand a DMB. They take on design for the balance. It's typically 20 or 30% of design.
Right, yeah, like a no-bated design and build, so the consultants will get no-bated at a point in time.
Yeah.
Through the builder then will manage it from that point on. Right. That gives the developer the ability to control the design to the point where they're happy.
Yeah. That's good. Have you got any other work in the district at the moment?
Yeah, we do. We just finished the car park building in Frankton there.
Right. That's right.
We're in for consent for the next 2 levels on top. We're using the Actor-Egger pattern system. So we had first round of RFIs back from council on that. So we've got funding in place through MaxCap. So that'll start in the next couple of months. And then we've got a couple of ECI projects that we're working on, being 2 hotels. So,
Good. Okay. Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Mickey?
Thanks. Yeah, just a couple of questions around the consents. Sort of how many are we waiting on, building and resource consents? How many still to come?
How many building consents to come, or resource consents?
And resource consents. I'm just, obviously consents are sort of the piece of the puzzle that's not complete yet. So I'm just wanting to get a gauge on, how many consents of both kinds are still waiting for approval.
For the current state, resource consents, none. The resource consents are for future stages. But building consents, we always break up building consents. It's sort of typically somewhere between 7 to 10 consents, a staged approach, as is the norm. Certainly in the norm how we do things. I'm suggesting it's probably the norm as Dom. So, probably 6 to 7 to 8 consents building wise still to come. Nikki.
And so we don't need resource consent for the stormwater, I take it. That's building consent.
It's a good question. For some of them, the stormwater, I think there is a resource. Is it technically a resource? I'm not. Oh yeah, it is a resource consent. Yes. So for the consent, we're still trying to figure out what that process looks like. But yes, there is a resource consent for the stormwater. I'll sort of thought you're talking about the structure itself.
Right, and you were talking about that being sort of more complicated than you expected. Could you sort of outline some of the difficulties you've encountered with the stormwater process?
Again, I think it's just the volume of work. I don't think it's just something we're still working towards. I think the details still coming to light in that sense. So ground anchoring, what is the process, easements, things of that nature. So again, I'm probably not best placed to talk specifically to that. I probably defer to my construction team, but I think it's nothing out of the ordinary. It's just obviously it's a bigger piece of work than we initially envisaged.
Okay, yeah, it's just that the reason I ask is that my understanding is that these all need to be in place before we settle. And if we sort of haven't got clarity around the difficulties and where we're going with the resource consent, then it just gives me some concern about timeframes.
Okay. Thanks, Nikki.
No response to that.
Well, there's no
we're
question.
all on track and.
There wasn't a question.
So, did I ask a question? Do you have any concerns about meeting that deadline? So getting that done before settlement, or are you having discussions about, getting settlement done without that consent in place?
You want to answer the stormwater? The answer is no. There's no. They're 2 different stream of works. They're independent of settlement, so I don't think it's relevant. But it's more a concern for us prior to completion of the particular stage that we need to have the stormwater or effectively essential services resolved, because it's a risk at settlement of us settling the apartments, not at settling the land with council.
We have an agreement.
Okay, so you're saying you don't need that resource consent in place to settle?
For the stormwater?
Stormwater.
No.
Okay. Any further questions? Okay, Lisa.
Thank you, Dean. Right, nice to meet you. It's great to have construction around the table because I know it was a competitive process, so it's nice to see who's in the pool. And yeah, Matt and I've been already stalking, so just looking online while you're talking.
Yeah.
Looks like you've got some great projects underway.
Yeah.
I've been digging a bit around the broader benefit picture of the development because there's a lot of angst around, as you know, and you said you're not in the political sphere, but I'm sure you're in the media sphere. There's a lot of angst in our community that there's still an empty site up there and without people seeing what's actually happening on it, the community filling their own minds with what is going on. At Audit, Risk and Finance, I asked about what are the wider bits and, and we went back to the benefit studies that were done on that. I'm just going to open that up for my own notes. But I asked whether we might be able to get you to think about being on site sooner rather than later in a public information engagement type of way to let people come and talk, because there's nothing like face-to-face stuff, right, like this, us seeing and hearing from you and asking the questions, letting our community do the same thing, where we actually talk about what is going to be there. And the bits that I had out of the project objectives is that we're aiming to have a thriving residential focused mixed-use precinct stitched to the Queenstown town centre context that's got best practice urban design principles, is walkable, activated, livable, authentic, has consistent design language with high quality built form outcomes. And I am getting to a question, sorry, Glenn. But we're in a workshop format. It's the diverse retail mix, all of those bits. Can we get that? Can we get you out there and in front of them? And now we've got construction on board as well. We've obviously got some reassurance around the financial evolution that you've been going through and the ownership evolution you've been going to, that I think people just are seeking reassurance and seeking to ask you those questions.
Yep.
The other question I have for you, and this is on a broader New Zealand-based context level, and some of the early meetings you had with us, you talked about the constraints on the project because of all sorts of legislative stuff, materials, driving up costs, things you could do in Australia not being allowed here. We're seeing huge shifts in that.
Yeah, yesterday's announcement. Yep.
Just yesterday, right? Where you can now bring a lot of the efficiencies and knowledge that you have in your Trans-Tasman work, perhaps to this project. Can you speak to that a little bit? How might that impact what you're able to deliver? And does that impact anything around timeline or outputs? I'm curious as to what we're seeing coming at us fast. Is that going to deliver positively for the project, or is it going to constrain you?
Look, all really good questions, and I think we see commencement of construction as an important milestone in terms of making a bit more noise than we've done. Obviously, there's a lot of speculation out there. None of it's very much fact-based, nor actually verified. So, other than complying with the DA, nothing's changed. We have requirements in which we meet, just because we've got a time in which we have to settle, and we're well within that. So nothing's deviated. There's nothing untoward or indifferent effectively happening, right? Other than it's a significant project. It takes time to set this up early. Assuming council completion was achieved late last year, we started the pre-settlement process early this year. It takes time. You've got to get a $200 million facility with a lender. There's mortgage documents, there's lawyers' contracts, there's negotiating building contracts. There's just because nothing's on site doesn't necessarily mean nothing's happening. I think that's the illusion that's made it speculated in the industry. Nonetheless, we're happy to talk to anyone. We're happy to speak to anyone. We're confident in the project. We're committed to this town. We have been since 2018. We're lucky enough to have finished a project, $250 million job in Auckland in a very difficult market where there's towers of unfinished buildings and what have you. To answer your other question, yes, I mean, Dom, which is kind of why we were attracted to CMP, they were very more proactive in terms of value management suggestions, a bit more flexible in terms of delivering things outside the realm. At the moment, there are a lot of restrictions legislatively, but yeah, I haven't read specifically, maybe you can talk to the announcement, but we were told of these building consent changes coming for a long time, so it's good to finally see them. And I think we'd like to see that translate into some cost savings in the project for the benefit of everyone. Council's effectively a partner. The more we make effectively in this project together. So I'd like to think that changes in the building materials and obviously whatever the Prime Minister introduced yesterday would effectively translate to more efficient and more competitive pricing. But you can probably talk to specifics on the materials.
Yeah, very good question. I think we're quite excited to see what this is going to mean for the industry, but I think the devil will be in the detail. And I suppose it's, I think they're talking about products that would be in line with the New Zealand Australia standard, but I suppose it's going to be the body that actually makes that determination, because when you have different standards, different ways things are measured in terms of building performance or product performance. So I think it's a great announcement. It's got great potential, but it's actually going to be a case of going to England and getting a piece of their fire-rated plasterboard and have someone tell you that complies with the New Zealand standard. That's where we can actually understand is this going to work and what are the savings going to be. So still very, very early days. There's obviously the competition in terms of the way it's split up with the sort of Carters and the Fletchers and placemakers. That there needs to be more players coming to the market as well, and what are their barriers to entry, and how easy can they get in. But I think it's a good start. But in terms of a quantum of savings, we're still very early to be able to make any assessment on that. But it's certainly on the radar.
Great. That probably my last question is, and you've alluded to it a bit there. We've talked and heard from you over our whole triennium around some of the challenges to building within Queenstown's constrained market, and capital works about 190 million. I think we've chucked around this table of the market being able to deliver in a year, but not just that, being able to get in and access sites, get your crew. I feel like we've got a really short memory back to COVID and how much that impacted on the sector and the rebuild just to be able to deliver this piece of work. Can you speak to a little bit around what that's been like over building back up to be able to actually deliver this project? Because again, we see an empty site up there and everybody goes, it's been taking you guys forever, nothing's happening, what's going on? But if we just reflect back to the disruption that we've come through and what you've had to actually get to where you've got a builder at the table and you're about to settle, there's been delays or perceived delays to that settlement. What have you navigated to here, shorter than I've asked you, to sort of talk us through that bit?
I mean, we were in the construction phase through that COVID times, and we had the Alliance who were doing that work. So, that was a challenging time for everyone. Yes, we were a little bit late delivering to the timelines in the development agreement, but I think given the circumstances, if we'd maybe done it a little earlier, that may have not been in the right place at the right time. And similarly, if we were a bit later right now, I mean, you guys are raring to go and you're seeing the opportunity now. Maybe it just worked out the way it should have in terms of the sweet spot. But yeah, I mean, it took us a little bit longer to finish the works than was otherwise anticipated. So if there is a delay in this, it was probably more to do with the council obligations, not necessarily the developers' obligations, although it was all going on.
Again, I think, I'd be staggered if there wasn't a single project in the country that wasn't late during the COVID process. It's just fact, right? Budget and program post-COVID, fundamentally different. So ultimately, the clock only technically started ticking after council completion of works, and we're well within that. So in terms of, we will be settling the land well before we're required to settle land in accordance with the DO. We would like to start next month. We're ready to go. It's just a question of how long can we sort of close out the final few things that we've been working through over the last sort of 6 or so months. But managing, I think one of your questions was managing traffic and construction management plans. I mean, I've probably at least third or fourth traffic management plan with council, and the relative, consenting teams are doing that. Obviously, we're going to have to manage the impact of the town with a lot of, trucks coming in and out. Where do we house our workers? How do we house our construction teams? Where are they coming from? Where are they living? Where are they Are they fly in, fly out? It's probably more questions for Dom than for me, but it's certainly something we're conscious of and we need to work through. And we have actually had meetings with council's consenting team in relation to workers' accommodation. Where can we house that? Is it even possible? Is there a consenting process associated with that to prevent? I know Naylor Love have got staff, it's not Mr. Dom, have got staff in Cromwell that they shuttle in every day. Like, that's the last thing we'd like to achieve on the site. I don't think that's the best outcome for anyone.
Just go to Matt, sorry, go to Matt. Matt's got a question. So did you hear? No, I was just, yeah, Matt, and then Esther, because we're just running out of time.
Yeah, thank you. Just touching on those cost escalations, it's been 5 years of hell, I'm sure, for the construction industry to try and estimate the costs. What's your crystal ball say about how you approach, estimating those costs in the next 5 years? Because that's going to be challenging for you. And then secondly, you've done a couple of projects in Queenstown and you just finished one off and you're about to do a little bit more. What are the lessons learned that you've had from doing those projects in this town, which construction-wise, accessing labour and getting places for them to live? Are there lessons learned about operating in this town versus some of the bigger cities that you operate from?
To be honest, I think in our ethos and how we operate around the country, and I mean, we've been to Fiji and built Hilton and all over the show, that it's the same. You need to be. We're a management company, so we need to manage the site efficiently and basically open up work areas for subcontractors. So subcontractors want to come and work for you if you're organised and they have a clear space and they can get their turnover up. It's not really that, it's not difficult, but a lot of building companies seem to get that wrong. So if we're fair on the subbies, we open up workplace, we give them a nice clear run. If they get 5 days to paint a level, we give them 5 days. We don't give them 3 days because the guy before has been in delay. So we keep it really simple. Open up the workplace, pay them on time, treat them respectfully, and then you have no trouble getting subcontractors on your site. Subbies don't want to go work for a builder that's late, that's hacking their claims back, that's not paying them. So it's just, and that stands true. In Taupo, we're starting a hotel, Fiji, Wellington, Christchurch. It's the same thing down here. Here that the market is a bit tighter. There's no doubt about that. But the resource is still here. I mean, you see plenty of work going on around town, so the resource is here. It's just attracting them to your site with a well-organised, well-managed project.
And so the first question was around sort of estimating that budget and keeping that budget under control over the next few years.
Yeah, I think, we back cost every project that we do. We're obviously pricing a lot of work moving forward. We're one of the bigger buyers of placemakers, so we have a direct lead to, their sort of senior guys in terms of where they're seeing pricing heading. So any changes in pricing, we're getting a decent notification a long way out. We indent materials, we do off-site payments. We'll work with Merrick in terms of the financing to understand, what deposits we can pay or what materials can be indented, can be purchased offshore. So we'll have a massive focus on procurement right at the front end, so we de-risk that. So in that first 6 months of starting, we'll want to have basically every main package locked in and have materials all ordered, so we're not running that risk that in 2 years' time when we're buying tiles. Tiles are going up 40%, but that's also a risk that we take on as a builder, right? That's a builder's risk that we've managed for 38 years. And you get caught out every now and then, but we like to think we're pretty diligent and manage that risk pretty well. But I think we're certainly seeing reinforcing structural steels will come back as of late. The hardest products have had some small increases, 4 or 5%. Timber's come back, so it's definitely stabilised. There's no doubt about that, which has been positive for the industry.
I think just the one thing I had, the uniqueness of the project, you can show pipeline, which I think is a huge attractiveness to it, a subcontracted trade market. Like if you're a singular project, it may be difficult, they're here today, gone tomorrow, but if you've got pipeline of work, like we're fortunate enough to do as a collective, I think it makes the job far more appealing to certainly builders and then obviously the subcontractor market because you can show longevity of work.
Yeah. Esther, and we'll just round it up the last one.
I was thinking about community outcomes. Originally, we talked about different typologies. We talked about affordable accommodation, have we got any guarantees still around the number of dwellings that sit in that category?
Well, other than what we have consented, ultimately, again, the market ultimately determines what the market is. I'm not don't profess to be an expert, and certainly Miles or Mark at the back there don't either. I mean, there's still product south of $1 million, and there's obviously products significantly more expensive than that. I mean, I think there's a yield that governs the entire precinct, and I think we'll be well and comfortably within that.
Okay.
So just touching on that, so you just give us the range of prices you've pre-sold.
I think we
And maybe a ratio.
Yeah. Again, I'm sure we speculated to give you a ratio. We've sold product at 750,000. We've sold product, north of $18 million.
And it's a 10 hectare Lakeview site, 5 hectares reserve land, 5 hectares of development land. The council's retained the Lynch block, which is a full hectare for future development. It's part of the subdivision, so that's been, I guess, had an uplift in value. But more in particular, it's had an increase in intensification, and the council still put that aside separate to the DA for future use. I think the outstanding resolution is something along the lines of consideration for affordable housing or worker accommodation, something along those lines, to be confirmed. And then, of course, there's the 5% contribution to affordable housing. So all the gross land proceeds from both the DA, which includes base payment plus any super profit if it was to eventuate in the future, plus the WellSmart deal, and the sale to them, 5% of the gross land proceeds go to the Affordable Housing Trust, and those payments are already starting to roll. So again, if there's a base land payment today for Lot 8, which is 8% of the land area, so the council currently owns all the land up there. So it's not like we've sold the land and we don't own the land. It's a staged development. Lot 8, which is the first stage, is 10% of the development land. It's only about 3% of the whole site. So it's not like all the land is gone. And there'll be a base payment for that, but once it's built and there's people standing in it, then there's a wash up, and if the land actually was worth more than that because of reality, not just because of the value of this desktop exercise, the actual real value of it in 2-3 years' time when people are standing, that's when there's a payment back to council around the value of the land. So we're dealing in less sort of paper exercise. We're dealing in actual where it is and where we
typically design, obviously, those that can afford $18 million is the fortunate few, right? So we always typically design what we think is the most affordable, product, and ultimately the market determines. So we provide a product at the cheapest price possible, most affordable price, and if someone wants a bigger product, they typically consolidate. So one becomes 4 consolidated units. And I think I think it's where you're asking the question of affordability. I think building if you remember, we increased half of it effectively for 7.9 minimum, which should inherently, instead of charging a day rate. So I think for building A, you have that sort of, which is effectively a restriction on what you can charge, and sort of by virtue of the length of stay. Obviously, that stuff's not sold.
So I think for me, there's a lot to unpack there. So one of my other questions was kind of related to what Lisa asked, which was, as you said, from your point of view, there's nothing untoward at all. And I think it's just that our community doesn't understand it. So I guess my question is for Mike and for partners to kind of ask if we could do some kind of media stand-up, as you've suggested, on site, an opportunity that our community could ask these questions, because there's so much involved in what you just said.
Yeah, I mean, we've only...
It would be unusual
spent less than 50 million on the site so far. And some commentators are featuring that with other developments that the council are doing outside that, and they're attributing it to the DA, which is the DA. We're under 50, we've got another 5 to spend on some of the deferred works. So that's where it sits, and that's all in the public realms, in the Audit and Finance Risk Committee reports and stuff, so it's all there.
I just wonder if we could take the opportunity to provide some easier, more accessible information that we can do with partners, so that our community can understand that it's probably not a massive exercise, to be honest. You've got the answers, but people can't interpret it and understand it easily. So it's could be more readily available. So that's kind of my question to
I think we
the
can,
organisation and the partners.
and one of the things we can continue to talk with the developer around how we refresh some of the material that's out there. Because
Yeah,
you're right, there's a lot of material. There are processes that we've been through, as Paul has explained, some of the history of where some of those community payments have come from and what's there. I can imagine, yes, they do get lost in
Yeah.
time. But I think we also need to remember, and Dean's spoken to that, this is a big complex DA. Anyone who thought this was going to turn itself over in a matter of years, as opposed to decades, is probably foolish, because these things are designed to be long term. And go back, I think when council settled the DA, there were very strict settlement conditions, and we're working through those. And if we run too fast, the risk will get accused of one thing. If we go too slow, people are saying that it's not happening. So, we just need to walk through this as we do with any major development agreement. But we can certainly pick up those points that Lisa and you have made, Esther, and look to refresh some of the material that's out there so that we're reminding the community of those backstories.
yeah. I mean, because people that are working amongst it have that information readily available. You know the stuff, but even as a councillor, it's really hard to actually even remember over the number of years. Unless you're constantly reading it, it's impossible to keep on top of it. And my other question, sorry, is just a kind of reminder as well for our community in terms of beyond housing, what do the kind of community facilities or other aspects of the development look like?
The current stage or the whole lot? Yeah.
Well, current stage and whole lot.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think a significant portion of Lakeview is very much public places. I mean, I would have thought it'd be surprising if more than 40-45% side coverage, which obviously there is a road network, but most of it is effectively landscaping. I think, one of the, again, community, obviously, I think allowing the CBD to grow effectively should, obviously there's, competing challenges with other markets in Frankton, but, effectively extending the footprint of the CBD typically, forces the downtown CBD to grow and effectively creates a competitive tension with competitive markets like a Frankton. I mean, it's very much a transport-orientated development, focus on walkability and accessibility and things of that nature to limit the number of cars coming in and really sort of force that sort of behavioural change.
We still have the plaza and the retail for the eventual stage.
Yeah. So the plaza, very well. The whole ground floor has to be retail. There's no at the moment. At the moment, the whole ground floor plan, there's a prohibition, from my understanding, on doing any residential on the ground floor. So the entire ground floor plan across the entire precinct is some form of retail and or commercial F&B use.
Active edges.
Active edges.
Back to the structure plan back in 2014.
So I mean, in terms of bringing a new product, new offering, new amenities, new food, new retail, all that whole new public parks, pocket parks, plaza activation with sort of effectively the adjoining Oddball site. I'm not sure what that's called, but that's obviously a hectare of land of just green space. So it's not built form in its entirety. It's very little site coverage compared to the norm. I mean, typically you try and get a 70 or 80% site coverage when you typically develop where. Again, I'm not sure if Thomas is in the room, but I would have thought we're south of 50% site coverage across all the lots. So, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of daylight some of it for anybody listening.
Okay, thank you for that. A little bit over time, but thank you, Dean. Thank you, Don. Just going to call Tom for a second.
And thank you, Jack.
Yeah, and Jack, and the money man, in the background. Right, all good. Yes, until next time.
Thank you.
Next time.
Cheers.
Thanks, guys. We'll roll straight into Wanaka Airport, please.
Thanks, Julian.
Do you have the presentation?
It's table to change the last 3
Presentation.
Yeah, anyway, we can, what's you want yeah, I'll get, well, so I'll be here online, I did it, so yeah, it's really, man. I can support you in this. Okay, yeah. I can do that. It's all good. Just to be able to share it. Yeah, do you remember how much things we tried? Yeah, I do. I was going to, I might skip one. Kia can talk to me right now. Ask Paul, he might just get to share it up. Oh, yeah. So maybe I should just yeah. Hello, Chair. Neil, can you hear me?
Yeah, good morning.
Are you able to just share the presentation through your Teams? That's probably the quickest way to do it.
No worries, I can do that. That's fine.
Cool, thank you. Paul, we've moved on to another item. Thank you.
Just confirming that everyone can see the presentation.
Yes.
Yes, all good, thank you. Welcome, Megan.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. Great to have Aegis back around the table again. And I just want to introduce Jeff Anderson. I think we all met Jeff last time, advisory lead for Aegis. And Jeff, do you mind just running us through who we've got online?
Yeah, cool. Thank you. Great to be back here, everyone. So hopefully everyone can hear too. I've got two of my colleagues with me today. We've got Kia Forbes, who is our aviation lead across Australia and New Zealand. You can hear us all right, Kia? Yep. And
yep,
Neil's, cool, thank you. And Niels Van Tor, who's also part of our aviation team. They're both based in Melbourne, so are not here today, but have been over as part of the engagement and will be back for the final presentation as well. Cool. So we've sent through a pack with some info on the first round of the project. In terms of where the project is at, we've done the first round of engagement, we've collated that information, and we're about to get, or just obviously the session with you here today, and then we're about to get into the second round of engagement, which is going to dig into a bit more detail, which we'll touch on later in today's session. So the plan for today, hopefully you saw our brief agenda, but we're going to run through the results and findings and some of the sort of information that was gathered as part of the first stage, so you get a taste for where things are at. We will then, I guess, encourage any comments or feedback just to make sure that we can capture that. And then we're going to do a bit of an overview around what the plan is for the second round of engagement, so you can see where we're heading with the scenarios and how we're approaching that second round, which is starting in the next couple of weeks. So if there's nothing on that, we'll just jump straight into it. Kia is more over the detail, but I might do some of the presenting and you can just jump in with some of the comments, Kia, if that's all good with you.
Yeah, let's go with that. Tag team.
Cool, thank you. So this first one, just a quick overview of the engagement levels we had. So we did an online component to the first round of engagement as well as the in-person sessions in Wanaka. So you can see the numbers there. We had a pretty good level of engagement across the 3.5 weeks it was up online. The in-person sessions, we had approximately 90 to 100 people come through across the two sessions, and well, which is reasonable numbers, but I guess the thing we're most impressed with, or all the people that stayed for sort of 45 minutes to an hour and spent a long time providing a lot of detail in those sessions. So it's not only just about, obviously you want to get a good quantum and a good spread of the community, but really the quality of the information as well and the time and the thought that people put into it. So that was probably the key takeaway from those in-person sessions, and we'll be repeating the same process for the second round with both the online and in-person element. And then we also got a number of email submissions from some groups providing their, I guess, thoughts and input into the process. So if we jump to the next one, Niels. Just a couple of photos from the sessions. So the sessions were set up with a whole lot of interactive maps and workstations where people could I could see what other people were thinking and saying. I think a number of you actually came along to some of the sessions, which is great, and then contribute themselves as well in quite a visual context, and that's going to be a similar plan for the next round. Cool. So in terms of some of the results, we'll jump through them. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to have a look, but we'll just quickly jump through. So this was really just setting the scene for where everyone was based and or spent most of their time that we got feedback from, which is not a surprise. The majority was from Waiaka or the Upper Clutha, but there was also a good spread of some people who were contributing from right around the region, and even a couple from further abroad in the North Island. So this one was, I guess, just in terms of the people that responded this. So there's a mixture of the content. We've merged it where possible, but the online and the in-person data wasn't always just directly applicable. So some of them one or the other, but we've tried to bring a bit of both into this presentation. In terms of who's currently using the airport, you can see about a quarter of the respondents currently use it, and the number one reason for people using it, I think this was primarily people interpret it as aimed around as an airport for travel rather than necessarily their place of employment or some of the other things that the airport's used for, but really around convenience and travel time savings. And a lot of that would have been around the Stowns Air service, which unfortunately is now no longer at the moment. And then if no, why did they not use it? And primarily you can see their costs. So the majority of people would still go to Queenstown, or were still going to Queenstown for their commute to wherever they were heading, primarily because of cheaper flights. There were a couple of environmental questions within the surveys that we captured, and you can see there, so what environmental outcomes should we be prioritising as part of this planning process? There's quite a good spread across a lot of them, which is good, and a lot of the community is very engaged on this topic, which is a great thing. But you can see that in terms of the biggest slices of the pie around this one was anything to do with emissions reduction incentives, regional conservation actions, but also emergency management was quite a popular topic, which is I think a really good one for the community to be thinking about, and we touch on that later. And then also travel choice. So how do you look at that and with an environmental lens on it? And then the second half of the question, sorry, Neil's back one quickly, what aspects of environmental stewardship? And this one really was effectively all of them were important. You can see that there's a slice of the pie there that everyone wanted to know. Cool. Next one, Niels. So this was us asking, so we weren't asking the question so much as this is what the community told us around what it currently uses the airport for. So you can see the largest towers on the graph by a wee way are general aviation. So primarily it's a general aviation airport at the moment, but also a large number of current local businesses and also tourism. And then you can see further down there's things like gliding and events and a few bits and pieces that registered. And I guess the other ones where people are using it, but the graph's far lower, is probably opportunities for future, I guess for part of the element of what we're looking at is are there opportunities for growth or more use there, things like the medical, medevac flights, or agriculture, horticulture, supporting that industry, or emergency resilience again. So I won't read through all of the bullet points, but we can circle back on any of these later on as part of the scenarios. So I guess what we've tried to do is tie a lot of these themes into the second round so that we can actually dig a bit deeper and explore that. In terms of concerns with the current airfield, so Keir will tell you, who's involved with airports all around AU, NZ, around the world, that every single airport you just about deal with, noise is the number one concern that comes across. So the fact that noise isn't the number one concern in Wanaka is a little bit unusual, but also a positive. And I think part of that is to do with, I guess, so often helicopters are a big cause of noise concern, but helicopters are really well, I guess, accepted and part of the culture in Wanaka. They've been there for a long time. They do a lot of stuff in the airport. It makes up, for lack of exact numbers, roughly 50-50 split between fixed wing and helicopter use in the airfield. Helicopters operate really well at the airport. Mike Haynes, who's our aviation specialist and works in just about all the small airports in New Zealand, noted during his time there, it's just about the only airport in New Zealand where helicopters actually follow the flight path, which is following up the runway as they leave the airfield and not just taking off left, right, everywhere. So there's so helicopters, I guess, they take a lot of, they're well respected, but they follow the rules and they operate in a safe manner. And they've done a lot in Wanaka. There's a long history of helicopters in Wanaka, so I think that's probably why noise and some of the things that you might see in other airfields isn't such a concern at the moment for current operations. The biggest concern that came through, as you can see, is the risk of over-tourism. So increasing visitor numbers beyond what the local infrastructure can tolerate. So that was what came through, I guess, loud and clear. And then there's sort of a spread across the other items. Cool, next one. So what are the most important outcomes for you from the airfield? So there were sort of 4 that stood out as being more prominent. That is the potential for increased connectivity. So how does Wanaka Airport enable, we can look at the questions you said. Connectivity, so opportunities for more connectivity to within NZ, recreational activities, airport employment is the single biggest one, and it's already a large employer in the region, but obviously potential for more of that if that's what the community is saying they want. And also high on the list was that it pays for itself.
So what's the total employment? Sorry.
Currently there are about 250 people either directly or indirectly supported by the airport employed, which is quite a large number in Wanaka. It's quite a number anywhere, but yeah. So, future for Wanaka Airport. So this one was pulled out of, Neil can give us a bit more background if you need to in terms of where we got this, but in terms of the comments and support about it, looking at it in terms of an airfield for this more from a connectivity point of view rather than an associated development point of view, but as you can see, there's really large support for either remaining as a sort of business as usual airport or becoming slightly more of a domestic hub. Very limited / no support for either closing it, which is good, and or becoming an international airport.
So that chart there aligns with some of the evidence that was coming through on the previous slides around the comfortableness with the current GA activity that the airport currently is used for. With then, that kind of, interest in some domestic connectivity. At the time of round 1, we still had the services between Wanaka and Christchurch, and that seemed to be quite well regarded. And I guess that sort of third column there, become a domestic airport, was just exploring, is there another domestic town that Wanaka could benefit from being connected to? Yeah. But interestingly, like this graph tells us another really sort of quite clear story about the 2 that didn't score well. So not really much interest in closing the airport. The airport is actually seen by most people that came through that it provides some use to them or the community in some way. And if you did this study in other towns or cities around the world, closed airport could be a little bit higher compared to other cities or towns. So there's actually some really good underlying support for the airport to remain, and equally no real interest in it to become an international airport. And that's those give really good bookends as well, I think, in terms of what the communities and the stakeholders are wanting from it.
I see there's a hand up. Do we want to take questions?
Just keep going.
Keep going.
Yep.
So as part of it, we collated a SWOT analysis, which is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. Sorry, the other half of it's on the next slide, but it gives you a good feel, I guess, for what the community as a whole currently sees the airport in terms of those lenses. So you can see in the strengths, obviously the location, Wanaka is obviously an amazing location, but it also has great attributes for things like terrain flying, gliding and other elements in the aviation space. The general aviation services that they currently offer are really well, they operate really well, but also well supported and well used. Employment, large employer, it's a small airport, which means that the users currently have access to use it relatively easily. There are a lot of costs associated with it, less noise, but also, I'm just trying to think, really good airspace. So there's open airspace at the moment, which enables it to be used for a lot of people and really easily. Events, the Warbirds was really well supported and acknowledged, but also the NASA launch brings prestige to the town. And then the business/commercial outlets seem to be pretty successful and provide good employment. On the flip side of the strengths, the weaknesses, so the existing infrastructure and utilities, there were both to the airport, but also people highlighting Wanaka as overall has infrastructure and utility gaps. There was a strong comment around the management and oversight and how that's perceived amongst the local community. Cost recovery, so the airport doesn't currently cover all of its own costs and is subsidised by the QLDC ratepayers. The cost to use, that's more from the user's point of view in terms of costs have increased over the last few years. Lack of vision was highlighted, so I guess that's what this project is really looking at. And then the existing exit of the airport is actually quite hazardous and tricky to entry off the main road at full speed.
Jeff, you've done, we haven't mentioned it yet, but you've also done engagement with the user group itself.
Yeah,
so
So some of these come into, so some of that forms part of the overall SWOT analysis, but also there's a couple of separate slides. So we've engaged with the community. We did a separate session with all the users out at the airport the day before the other engagement, and we'll also engage with a number of other parties that have reached out and been involved, such as QAC, who's the operator, but also Christchurch International Airport reached out, and local tourism, and business chamber and those sorts of people. So yeah, we've tried to bring in, where appropriate, bring in all of those elements to it. Opportunities, increased domestic flights, which has obviously came through before. More GA offerings, so hangars, training, etc. And having the support to enable that to happen. Emergency resilience, opportunity for it to be a far more, I guess, proactive in that space around how it could support an emergency, but both from something like an earthquake, if it was to happen, but also for things like medical evacuations. Land, there is a lot of land around the airport that provides opportunities. Innovation, so both the aviation industry is changing at the moment and there's opportunities in that space, but also the unique terrain and location probably lend itself to trying to push that space a little bit, but also things like hydrogen or electric aircraft and what Wanaka could do or play in that space, and the opportunity to make the airport more profitable. Threats, over tourism, which we've touched on already, and that was a big one that came through from the community. Management, the QLDC, QAC management is perceived as disconnected with the wants or needs of the users. Potential airspace restrictions, and a lot of that came through. There's a really strong gliding community and some other airspace users who don't necessarily use the airport itself, but really value the freedom of airspace that they have currently with no restrictions. Readiness to respond. So currently a potential threat is that it is not particularly well set up to respond necessarily. Jets came through strong in terms of potential threats to the community sees, and inflation of running costs. And you see that obviously with sounds there pulling out and things happening, there are a lot of costs in the aviation industry that are going to continue to potentially increase, and or how that's managed. Okay, so this was this was the user group here, and a couple of the themes that came through from the users themselves. So general aviation currently works really well at the airport. People want to keep it as a general aviation airport, even if there are more connections added. So don't lose what they have. Airport has good integration of helicopters and fixed wing, which I touched on earlier, which is not always the norm. The group is generally against significant changes in operation or jets. There's also concerns about becoming similar to Queenstown Airport if these occur. The airport employs a lot of local people, and they, I guess, really wanted to emphasise that point, but also, I guess, suggest that there is opportunities for more of that if the right infrastructure and facilities was provided to them. There's currently not a lot of hangar space that they perceive to be available, and there's not necessarily like fibre or main services and stuff connected out there that would potentially enable other businesses to establish. Fuel and maintenance facilities could be improved. Hangars and flight training accommodation would be welcome, and infrastructure gaps, so sewage, water, fibre, power connections, and the like, not necessarily being available. So there were some additional submissions and stakeholder discussions that came through via email from various groups. I won't run through all of them, but you can see them there. But generally, the themes that came through from these groups were pretty similar, and you can see. So there's support generally for the GA aviation that is happening out there. There was some strong themes around environmental sustainability and wanting to make sure that was an important element to it. The community voice on governance. So there were a lot of comments around, I guess, the governance of the airfield and what that should or shouldn't look like in their eyes. So alignment with the tourism strategy, cultural and recreational values, and how the airfield can support those, and the surrounding airspace, and also opposition to any jet expansion or potential jet expansion.
Across the 6 email submissions from the 6 groups, there was actually from our perspective some relatively good cohesiveness and consistency of opinion, really sort of underpinned by strong environmental sustainability and cultural values. I think is really what's connecting the different groups. The different groups we see can represent different things, but actually are connected quite cohesively at a values sort of level. So, that kind of in terms of tourism, it's value of tourist or value of tourism over quantity, and that's aligned with the concern and the threat of over tourism, which is aligned with the threat of large jets. So you can see how the thread ties together. But one comment we just wanted to put across is we got 6 email submissions, and there was actually some really good cohesiveness across all 6. So that, I think, is something that we can all work with going forwards.
So as part of the engagement in the surveys we had, there were a number of opportunities for people to put comments and or word text. So we've just pulled out some of the themes and some of the bits that align with that to give you a taste. So how does Wanaka Airport currently enable a Wanaka lifestyle? So minimal commercial plane use. On the flip side, it doesn't if you can't fly commercially. It provides an operational base for those with their own aircraft, provides a variety of skilled employment and educational opportunities, tourism, adventures, attractions. The connection to the rest of the country is poor, so instead I regularly drive to Queenstown to fly from there. Fostering GA in the light aircraft community provides recreational opportunities for many. It is a globally valuable infrastructure base for effective mountain flight training. So I understand there's not a lot of viable locations for mountain flight training, and Queenstown Wanaka is a very good one. Wins over Wanaka, events, tourists, rural access. It would contribute significantly more if reasonably priced airfares were available on medium-sized planes. There are lots of small businesses operating there that support employment and provide services to local and tourists. Gateway to airborne adventure sports. a place for search and rescue helicopters to be serviced, support keeping this as a GA airport with no changes to the airspace. Paragliding in the region is one of the top 10 places to come in the world and the #1 in New Zealand. So then the next one was what they said in terms of the future of Wanaka Airport, or what you see. So it could become an aviation centre of excellence for emerging and growing businesses. Wanaka could be used for more regional flight connectivity, keep it small and local without commercial big planes to maintain its unique space in New Zealand's aviation scene, continuing to enhance our current lifestyles, not as a major port for visitors, but as a connector to other centres. Air New Zealand flights to Christchurch, Wellington and Auckland, especially Auckland, to connect with international flights. Increases domestic connections to main centres in New Zealand, reducing the need for vehicle movements to Queenstown. Wanaka airspace area to remain open for free flight. I hope to see the airport remain mostly unchanged. Keep the status quo. I worry that words like potential and development mean more people, and that spoils what we have here, and continue to support the local businesses that currently use it. There's a couple more there, and then we'll get into, or we might take a quick breather. I'll do this one.
Probably take this as read.
Take this as read? Perfect. So we're now, I guess, so that's sort of where do we want to take a quick breather and any comments, questions on that before we jump into what the next steps are?
Yeah, it's a good break. Thanks, Judy.
Any questions?
5 minutes. Yeah, just very quickly. So just to go back a few steps or slides, the one where you had 4 different uses of the airport. One was close it, business as usual, domestic airport, international airport.
Yeah.
Obviously, as it is, was the highest. Domestic was a little bit lower than that. International was much lower than that. I don't know whether you did mention it in one of the other slides, but is the real driver of that just not wanting jets?
That's obviously part of it, but I think the desire for no over-tourism, or the over-tourism thing, which, as Q sort of alluded to, I guess is the over-tourism, the value for the environment, the desire to not want jets, probably both from a noise point of view, but also the number of people that they could potentially bring in, or the perception around that. Yeah. So I think that all sort of links in with that, but that's definitely part of the scenario, but we'll explore a little bit more in the second round when you see that.
Yeah, that's what it's
I think the underlying theme about the jets is the real concern is about over tourism. I think is the real concern. Normally towns don't want big jets purely from a noise perspective, because that has social and health impacts. But what's interesting about Wanaka is the helicopters, celebration of helicopter operations and the contribution that helicopters have made to the town of Wanaka and the surrounds in setting up the history of the region. And so whilst Jeff's right there, noise is probably a concern about jets. It's probably the main cause of concern is the over tourism. So
thanks.
Nikki, and I'll go Quentin.
Thanks. Yeah, just a quick one. I was just involved with the Glenorchy airstrip management plan and the surveys and questionnaires around that, and it was quite useful when you broke it down. If when there's something like Airport as it is, or become a domestic airport, if you've got information on where different people come from, if you can then split it out and go, this many people who live in Wanaka want this. This is the split for the people that live out of Wanaka. We did that for Glenorchy, and it just might be useful for some questions where you see where people from out of town might be driving the outcomes, just so we can show that we've used the data in that way and split it out. It was really comforting, I think, for Glenorchy to understand that we'd broken the data down, and just, you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you. And also it can be quite interesting to ask the different questions around, do you work at the airport, and split out those, just to get a sense of where the demand for what is coming from and who has interests and so on. Anyway, thank you.
No, that's good. We've got some of those stats at the front of this pack as well. Also, people living in the area wanting to use the airport to connect. Sort of the general gist of that was some of them are quite happy to drive an hour over the hill to Queenstown to connect. Somewhere further afield, like Australia or Auckland, and some are seeking a connection to Christchurch, where they could then fly on to, say, an Auckland. And then some potentially are looking for a direct flight out to Auckland, or from Aucklanders coming in. So there was a bit of a spread in terms of that domestic interest.
Hugh?
Yeah, thank you. There's three things. Firstly, and I just made this comment on the notes, but you've referred to gliding. I don't know if that's accurate. I think gliding and paragliding and hang gliding are different things, sailplanes. So there is an interest out of Marama and, the best, one of the best gliding sailplane sites in the world. And then there's hang gliding and paragliding. I think it's useful to distinguish between those things.
Yeah, happy to update the notes for that. Just to clarify for everyone on this is hang gliding and paragliding. It's they're the ones that made the submission for this one.
Yeah, that's what I expect. But there is, as I said, there is another interest through CAA and various things in gliding sailplanes as well. And opening, they've got in Mackenzie Country, they've got an uplift above. They can open airspace above when the wave's on, for instance. So there's a different thing at play. There's low level airspace, but in that case, there's high level airspace. They go up to 40,000 plus feet. So anyway, the second was that I know you guys there was a bit of flack around this process. I think you've done a very good job at capturing the mood of the town. I think what you've reflected to us that you've taken on board reflects what I hear from the Wanaka community. So I just want to congratulate you on that, because I think that is a good starting point in moving forward with this process. The third one is you just talked about the noise issue, or the jet issue, and you've referred to it as over tourism. I encourage you to consider exploring that further in the next stage, is understanding you've assumed it's over tourism. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm saying that I think noise and I think infrastructure are infrastructure impacts are equally of concern, and I encourage you to explore that more.
Lisa?
Thank you. Sort of picking up what Councillor Smith was just saying there. Sorry, I read into the definition of over-tourism being that it is totally tied to infrastructure and whether that's matching it. And my question is sort of, if infrastructure was to be delivered at the pace required, would there be an appetite for more at the airport? And do we have enough of an understanding around what the infrastructure concerns are in the community? That makes that fear of over-tourism. Is it that we just don't want more people, or is it that we'd be fine with more people if we had assurances around energy, wastewater, whatever the boxes were that we needed to tick? Because I like that definition of over-tourism. It's probably a very common one that's in your report, but I really looked into that over-tourism is really beyond what the local infrastructure can tolerate. And I thought of all sorts of different destinations where I've been to, where the volume of visitors is huge, but local infrastructure can tolerate it. And what are the community actually asking us for there? Are they just going, no more, because actually over here you need to sort this. If we sorted that, is there an appetite to go more? And I think those really special deep dive bits, like celebrating the helicopters, it's so amazing to see the recognition of our learning environment, our training environment, our mountain flying, all of those cultural uses, just helicopters full stop. It's so neat to think that Wanaka is a place that loves and celebrates that. I think that was a real wahoo moment for me. And to pick up again on Councillor Smith's point, the other bit I liked in the report was it talks about free air. And I think that that would be a really good category to capture our paragliders, our hang gliders, our non-motorised. You don't need a plane to tow you up. You're in free air, you want free airspace because you're going where the wind blows you. Having done that, as has Councillor Smith, we're quite attached to those outcomes of being, and knowing how much competition we bring in internationally to fly and compete in our free air spaces. It's huge. There is a real fraternity of innovators and mavericks that have always enjoyed that free air space. And hanging out with so many, and I know I'm rambling now, but just to celebrate hanging out with so many of those mavericks last week at the 90-year celebration of this airfield and hearing their stories of Wanaka as well, I think that links to wins over Wanaka and the history piece and all of our aviation history there. It's really lovely to see so much of that reflected in the report too. So thank you, because you have got flag around it, but it's really great to read the outcomes. Thanks. And looking forward to stage 2 of a deeper dive.
I was just going to highlight the Destination Queenstown Lake Wanaka tourism submission. I think that's really interesting in terms of the over-tourism piece. And it's interesting that they are supporting general aviation, no expansion, but also I think where they talk about regenerative tourism, that's where I think there's an opportunity to work with them and the community around what, this is obviously a piece that needs to be further explored that may not actually ultimately sit with the ultimate scenario for the airport, but an ongoing piece of work.
Yeah, I can echo the words of Matt Woods, who's CEO of the tourism organisations in Queenstown and Wanaka. This regenerative tourism plan that was developed through a consultative process, as I understand, with lots of community involvement during COVID, was centred around. It's not that they don't want tourism. Of course, the region is dependent on tourism. It's about bringing the higher, what they call higher value tourists, and that doesn't necessarily mean a high economical tourist. For example, the example Matt gave me is, people who can come and connect more with us in our country and in our part of the world for longer periods of time than just a few days. So people who can come in, use the example of backpackers where they will come, they might work for 6 months and really take the time to learn about the region and also pass on their knowledge. For him was an example of a higher value tourist coming to contribute to the area as well as take something really valuable back. So it's not to say tourism's a bad word, but too much of it at a too fast pace, is I think the thing they're trying to avoid.
Thank you. You've got time for another.
Linda.
So Matt, and then we'll go to Linda.
One of the challenges we always have at council is how do you know you've captured the full voice of the community? And I'm sort of thinking about the 30-year-old mum and dad. They travel to Queenstown a couple of times a year to fly out of here, but they don't engage. They're not interested in the airport whatsoever, but their opinion won't be captured. How do you know that you've got that voice?
It's a great question. And I guess it's a hard one, but
it's one you have to answer, right?
And we have tried to, I guess, spread the message as much as we can, encourage people to do so, and we'll be doing that again as part of the second round. So hopefully, I guess that's one of the reasons we had 2 rounds, was to try and, because there'll be a certain number of people who will inherently want to get out and contribute to processes like this, and you can pull them out a lot quicker in the first round than the people like you alluded to. So hopefully, now that we've can sort of publicise what we did in the first round and then go out and provide a decent chunk of time for people to access and contribute in the second round, and they've got something a little bit more tangible to look at and poke at and comment on. It's always harder that first round where it's far more conceptual and there's far more, I guess, broader approach, which to bring the first round of information together, and then hopefully the second round when they can see something on a piece of paper and go, you really haven't, they might look at that graph and go, no, that really doesn't capture what I want to say, and I want to share my message a bit more strongly now. So hopefully some of that sharing this data in the first round of engagement and providing a bit more solid things to look at will help capture some of that additional feedback.
When you're doing the surveys, do you capture demographics of how old people are and what their interest background is?
I'm trying to think exactly what we did. We tried to get a bit of that. I'm not sure if we went into the age and gender or anything like that. There's always I think there was one question, there was a mix.
But even in the user groups as well, remember there's quite a good mix of the younger demographic in that group as well.
So there was a wide variety of people that came through the in-person sessions. There were, and because we held them at the rec centre and the other place was we did get some parents watching netball and a few things like that that popped in that probably wouldn't have come out of their way to do something like that, and did come and have a chat. So, but yeah,
we'll be pushing it.
But I guess hopefully those people, see something that promotes them or encourages them to participate.
Some of them are always going to be more comfortable to just come in online, and so that online component will still be there, and we're promoting it through Let's Talk. That's all about to. There's a big feature in there, so hopefully we'll just continue the momentum with it.
It'll stand at the new world.
There's probably quite a heightened interest in coming to talk to the consultants from Paris.
Linda?
Comment?
Kia ora koutou, thank you. Yeah, great information, great job. I think great information sharing. I'm just really concerned over, I guess, the numbers. You're talking 250 people actually work there, and the numbers of like the Wānaka stakeholders group. Our numbers were talking, 30 sort of people giving an appraisal or giving input over what they recognise as being really important outcomes to their decision. So I just wondered, what stage 2, whether there's a way that you're going to incentivise people to actually have their say. It's really, really concerning the numbers overall. I think maybe a free flight on a helicopter, or is it an open day at the airport, or, how are we going to get these numbers up to actually be relevant of an overall community input?
Yeah, I think, Linda, you could, if you compared this with other consultations that we've undertaken of late, number one, it's the first time I've seen on social media someone actually saying what a great job council's doing of consultation, even though it's delivered by Aegis, and that council should learn from that. Number two, this is actually comparatively a really strong level of engagement. I know that's difficult, but the important thing is that, if you're, I just recommend to all of you to reach out, because we want this to be district-wide engagement, especially as we move through into the scenario pieces, to really encourage people to get along, and that's really all we can do. You can't, we could suggest a prize, and then someone would accuse us of bribing the community to participate, so you can't really win sometimes, even though that is a good suggestion. So it's a tough one, but I feel really heartened by the level of engagement we got. I can tell you I would have been, I was relieved at the amount of engagement we did receive. So, and I hope we build on it again with the scenarios.
What's not in the stats as well is some of the email submission groups reached out to their groups as well. So there was a further reach that we couldn't quite capture or get the stats on, but we know that some one particular group's got a mailing list of over 3,000 people, and so there was reach through those groups, which is encouraging, because that's what those groups are there to do as well.
Okay, so we have a big sign on the Crown Range. If you're driving to the airport now, fill in this one.
Just go to Cody.
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to sort of help elaborate on that point, being 30 and sending a bunch of messages in the group chats to all my friends to try and get involved. I think when it comes to trying to get more numbers, that'll be easier to do when there's more of a question that's posed and you're sort of putting your perspective forward. I think this part of the consultation is very wide and open-minded. It came with no real predetermination or questions, which just tell us. And I think that's part of why you may not see as many people engaging. And so, I think when questions are asked in future, there'll be much more quantity. But yeah.
more than twice as many people as submitted on the local order done well.
The other thing you mentioned about the other groups, I think mentioned it, like in the community association, going to put out to their members on one of them, we just said all they've got to do is advocate, get out to their membership to put a submission in or get involved in a Chamber of Commerce, things like that. So we'll keep pushing that message out to those groups.
Yeah, I mean, actually, that's a good point, because, you know, to get Kieran's point, you know, the RTO has actually reached out to their members and then represented those views. So it has, in that regard, it's a wider reach than we're actually seeing.
Is there any of the feedback was already mentioned about, when they say jets, was there any discussion, any feedback about the size of the jets? Because in the future, you know, the type of plane to get from here to Christchurch, maybe a small jet, maybe, but they all just hung up. I think it seems to be they hung up about the A320 suddenly flying in.
Yeah.
Bigger, and that's where the over tourism thing comes from too, because they think bigger planes will bring a whole lot of people, just like the terrace argument, you know, you have to bring 380s into there to make that one pay, and where all the people are going to go. So
I think Kia wants to jump in right in.
It was, yeah, I think that the sentiment is more towards the A320s and sort of above those size jets. You know, there are propeller aircraft in the country that go up to 70 odd seats. You know, the ATRs, for example, that Air New Zealand has. And I don't, you know, from what we were hearing, think it's an issue with propeller aircraft. It's more what we would say the medium-sized jets, which is A320s, you know, Boeing 737s, and that sort of type. You know, you can get a Learjet, which is, you know, a 12-seater. And, you know, so I don't think the issue is with small jets. I think it's the more sort of medium to larger jets.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, keep on going.
Yep,
we can run through the so next steps. Gonna quickly so we've got a couple of we had one slide here, but we've actually developed 2 or 3 extra slides which we'll run through with you now, which will obviously be shared afterwards, but just to touch on, I guess, the next round. So what are we looking at? So I guess what we're proposing to do for the second round, obviously going back to the community with the in-person and the online engagement portions, similar to the first one, but we've tried to, I guess, decipher what we've heard through the first round and then pull together some scenarios, for lack of a better word, that people can then look at. But going through that, what I guess we saw is that there are some scenarios that are mutually exclusive, that you can look at and go, it's, you know, is it apples or oranges? And you pick one of them. But there's also elements to it where you could, what do you want to add to that fruit salad? Going off the trip piece with the, sorry, but do you want some grapes or some tomato or something else in here? And you could actually have 1, 2, 3, maybe even more of those added into one of those mutually exclusive scenarios. So, and we don't want to, we also, now we're going to go through, I guess, the plan is to have, you know, how do you look at these mutually exclusive scenarios and what's sort of clear preference from the community around that, and give a clear direction on what's that sort of baseline. But then what does the community see as being things that will be a benefit that you could consider doing around that might contribute to that in a way that is complementary and adds value. And what we need to try and do here is keep reminding people that this is a future use. This is not just what do you want to see happen tomorrow, or, you know, what we're looking at 10, 20 plus years, and how might some of these things, you know, add benefit or play out over a longer time frame. So we'll jump into a couple of so we've just got a high level to run through now up on the screen, just so you can get a taste for it, and there'll be a lot more detail comes behind this in the engagement, but we're aware of not wanting to go forever today. So I guess the 5 mutually exclusive scenarios that we're that you can see up there is, and the ones in red are the ones that really don't have a lot of support, but in the interest of making sure we've shown the full sphere of it. And
yeah, to retest.
Yeah,
we'll retest that in stage 2. You know, like Cody, I think, said, you know, put the options in front of them, and you might get a different response. So we want to retest 1 and 5.
Yeah. But yeah, and really get a feel for between 2, 3, and 4 where the the biggest support is. And these are really around the airport, I guess, in a way that a lot of people relate to an airport in terms of how does it support aviation and connectivity, and rather than some of those things you'll see in the next slide, which are more around the outside of it, what else can it enable or do or support. So you've got everything from closing the airport to Wanaka Airport being a general aviation only airport, pretty similar to what it is currently, to Wanaka being a general aviation airport with domestic links to Christchurch and or Wellington, because that's more the distance or sphere you can do with a smaller non-jet plane. And then Wanaka Airport being a general aviation airport, but with links broader, because likely if you're going to get a plane to Auckland, you're going to have a jet, otherwise it's going to take longer to get from Wanaka to Auckland than it would be to drive over to Queenstown and fly out. But just to, I guess, to really test and explore those and see where the sentiment lies and get feedback on them. And obviously the last one, sorry, international links, but in red.
The difference between 3 and 4 is it's important we separate 3 and 4 out, because 4 potentially requires more airport investment, such as, to accommodate a larger aircraft. We don't think the ATR, for example, could do that trip to Auckland. You might need larger jets to do it, which might then need some airfield works, some runway extensions, and so there's an investment decision there. It brings in potentially the contentious medium-sized and larger jets, and so whilst option 4 is a domestic option, it might trigger a lot of those threats that we were seeing and hearing a lot through stage 1. So important we separate 3 and 4 out. And
I guess this is really because the community may choose a scenario doesn't mean it can come to fruition, because if you want to have a regional domestic connection, you've got to have an airline that's willing to operate that connection, and at the moment that's quite a challenging prospect for any airline, and we've spoken with Air New Zealand as part of this process too, and you may want to allude a little bit here, but they don't currently have plans to fly to Wanaka, and they need to see some things change in terms of how they, their perception of the market before it would be commercially viable to do so. But it doesn't. But in terms of long term, this is aimed at future use. What do you want to set up, and what do you want to aim to be, and what do you want to be aspirational about has to be considered.
Just to that point, I mean, the question becomes, what is the time frame that the scenario looks over? That becomes quite critical. It's not tomorrow. It's not probably within 2 or 3 years. Equally, it's not a forever scenario. So I suppose that's the nature of these things. And it's giving some context to that, which is important.
So we're going to try and ask it within a couple of different timeframes. So the question will be aimed at what's more of a near to medium term scenario and what's more of a long term scenario, and does your perception of what, do you shift over time? Does your preference, maybe you're a 2 person at the moment, but in 20 years time you can see it should be a 3 or a 4? And so we're going to try and tease that out through the in-person and the online engagement.
Thanks, Kevin.
This is the last slide. So the next one should be the last one, pretty much.
There's a couple more, Jeff, just so you know.
Okay, we'll quickly run through it. So then the other part is the supplementary options, and we've tried to put them into sort of themes, but then there'll be a number of elements within the theme so people can get an idea of what we're talking about. So the first one, Wanaka Airport as a community asset. So these could all be done. You could do one of them, you could do part of one of them, or you could do multiple parts of them. So that's really around the, developing medical emergency and patient transfer services, and that might even involve, medical centre on site, earthquake emergency resilience centre, or solar farm community battery type, resilience around energy supply. A lot of airports do solar farms.
That one there. Sorry, Jeff, is so look, airports all around the world are going to need more electricity in the future because we're moving towards electric and hydrogen aircraft, and even hydrogen. Storing liquid hydrogen on site requires a lot of electricity. So solar farms are a good way of doing that as a green energy source. And some towns are taking the decision, let's power the airport and power the town as well from that solar farm as a really good green, smart city initiative, and would fall underneath that category number 1 as well.
So Thanks, Gear. So number 2, promote aero-related business growth to become a centre for aviation excellence and innovation. And that's really tying in some of those themes that obviously they do some stuff really well at Wanaka Airport already, but how can we do more of it, and how can you tap into what the future of aviation might look like and be proactive in that space? So, you know, whether it's enabling, you know, you could look at something like the future of aviation might be hydrogen or electric. You can either sit back and wait for that to come to Wanaka, or you can get out in front and try and encourage it and be at the forefront of that, and proactively seek things out in that space. Again, flight training, trying to encourage manufacturer testing, or, you know, make use of the amazing terrain you have there to encourage testing and training around those elements. But to do that, obviously we're going to put some information around these too, because a lot of these will require investment and will require infrastructure upgrades and costs associated with that. So whilst they might generate revenue, there's also things to consider there. Aim to be a local growth centre for employment through non-aero sources. So that's things like, do you want to host more events there or elements along those lines? Do you want to use the land or look to encourage the land around the area to be used for things, maybe recreational facilities, things like golf courses and driving ranges? There are airfields, there are things like museums, or do you want to use the land for more general industrial use? And do you want to encourage car yards often pop up at airfields, or you know, general distribution centres, or those sorts of things. So
this might not be the case for Wanaka or you know, the surrounding towns, but sometimes airports can be a good place to relocate businesses that are occupying really high value pieces of land in the centre of town, and can be better used for something else as the town is moving on and developing and sort of progressing. And so if you want to sort of clear the way a bit, and car yards is a classic that I've seen done well, where they've been, you know, sort of occupying really high value pieces of land and put them at the airport. You put 6 or 7 of them next to each other, and all of a sudden somebody can go car shopping on a Saturday. Just one example where it can solve a problem as well.
Cool, thanks, here. And then the last one, I know we want to keep moving, Wanaka Airport financially standing on its own feet. So just to explore that a little bit as a topic, given that it obviously supports a lot of local jobs and does a lot for the community already, as well as events such as Warbirds and everything, and the revenue that generates, NASA and the like. But there is currently QLDC does subsidise that. So exploring, obviously, because you can try and make the airport run as economically and cost effectively as possible. Do you want to, so just exploring that topic a little bit, how much, because things like the community asset and resilience, you might be able to get a real community benefit from it, but there'll be a cost associated with it, and how do you weigh those things up? So I think we're just about there. So yeah, in-person sessions, we'll have another interactive session similar to the first one, and then the online sessions again will be on the Let's Talk platform, with a similar, with background information. This slide pack will be shared so people can see what we got from the first round, and hopefully really encourage them to take the time to read that and put some of that into the survey, so that they then answer the second round of the survey with that knowledge and that lens on what they're thinking. Okay. There is the quick project timeline, which I know has been shared, so we can sort of take that as read, but we probably want to take a chance now to go around the room again. I'm not sure how much time we've got.
Just a reminder on that after we've been through this process, there's obviously a decision point will be looming, but it will be in the next triennium. So it'll be after October that will be coming to present back on the findings of this process, and then actually bring a paper to full council with regards a decision that will be in front of you.
I'll go to John first.
Yep, thanks for that. I just want to look at those scenarios, particularly the first and the fifth one. Just given the perceived agenda, given that some of the community perceive that council has an agenda, and to ensure that that's not, that it needs to be clear that options 1 and 5 had low support in the initial consultation, and they're in there being there for tested, because you can see that the people who think there is an agenda were saying, oh, you're including 5 because that's what you're pushing. So I think it's really important that that information is clear, that they're there to be tested, and they had low support initially. It's just around that perception that we have an agenda.
No, that's very much the plan, and they will be highlighted. We've got them in red there. There'll be a way to highlight the fact that they were lowly supported, but we obviously want to make sure that we've got the fullness of the range. So that, yeah, it'll be communicated as part of the process. Yeah.
Niels, if you jump to slide 25, it's a really good point you're making, John. Slide 25, which is that one there. You see options 5 and 6 there, like that. We could. I'm not saying we put big red crosses on them, but we will show that they were very low scored and therefore just there for a retesting, a reconfirmation, just seeing if it stirs up any other discussion around too. Yeah.
Simon?
Thanks, Glenn. Jeff, I was concerned you put tomato in your fruit salad. That was the first thing I was going to say.
Yeah. Sorry, I'll cut that out, Simon. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Technically, it is a fruit, but I'm not sure we should go there. Look, I think we've made some really good progress here. I've been obviously on this journey. I love the scenarios. I think it was really important to reaffirm that we are not running an airline, we are running an airport, and that there is some other players that need to decide, whether that is feasible. So I think it's important that the community understands that if you even go for scenario 3, it's not necessarily going to happen. There's just a lot, and I think having spoken with Andrew Patterson from Sounds Air, who pulled out of, who was Sounds Air pulling out, and his views on whether it's viable, you've reaffirmed that with Air New Zealand. I think there's a long road to hoe before any of those would actually, 3 in particular, would actually even happen. So I think just a little bit of clarity there that this isn't determinative. It is allowing or providing infrastructure for something like that maybe to happen in the future. So I think that, and I did really like those scenarios on the next page. I think they've really covered a real breadth of opportunity, and I think this was almost even the more important part. What do we want this airport to be outside of just providing general sort of aviation? And I think you've got some really interesting aspects there, which I think will engender a lot of response from the community and stimulate a lot of debate. So well done.
Just a quick one on the airline piece. I was at the government building there in Wellington earlier in the year for what's called an Airports Day. The biggest concern for the industry, and this is not a Wanaka thing, this is a New Zealand issue, is regional connectivity is at a lowest point that it's ever been, and Air New Zealand is it's their prerogative to put their aircraft where they want to put their aircraft. And I spoke to my contact at Air New Zealand, and they have 30 to 40 aircraft that could fly into Wanaka now in its current format, which are Q300s and ATRs. They're propeller aircraft, but they don't have any plans to put any of those aircraft into Wanaka at this point in time. So that is just an important fact as it is now. And that will change in the future, perhaps, but right now there isn't that desire by Air New Zealand. And the other sort of regional airlines like Sounds Airline are struggling. They're really struggling from a cost perspective to make regional flights and connectivity financially work. Their costs are just going up across the board, and so in New Zealand we have a problem with regional connectivity. That's not for QLDC to solve, but it's something that we all need to try and solve to get regional connectivity better than what it is now.
Thanks, Gert. And I made a mistake. I spoke to Andrew Crawford, not Andrew Patterson, so apologies for that. It was Andrew Crawford from Sounds Air.
So knowledge is knowing tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is not putting it in the fruit salad. Yeah. Why you go, Nikki?
Thanks. Yeah, 2 questions. Just when this comes to a decision, what are we deciding on? A high-level scenario, and then what's the process from there, or something else?
I don't think we have quite landed that, Nikki, and that will be a conversation with the next council, but potentially it will be deciding on a scenario and then working through the implications of what managing that scenario looks like.
Right. So this sort of leads into my second question, which is that we're consulting on high-level scenarios. And I think what we need is informed feedback from the community. We need them to understand the consequences and the trade-offs of the different scenarios, if that's how we're going to work. Because if we're landing on a scenario and we're going to progress that, to me, we need to think about how we, what the costs will be, what the user fees might be. All of those things need to play into how people make their decision. Otherwise, as a councillor, and I may not be in the room, but if I was in the room, I don't know that people understood the decision they were making. So I just think, what are your thoughts on when you go out with these high-level scenarios of working through the pros and the cons, the winners and the losers, the potential costs, capital costs, and the potential user fees, maybe in the long term, maybe in the short term, but they will influence people's answers, responses, and I think we need informed responses.
Yeah, so the intention is to try and put some sort of high level pros, cons / costs around these elements. It's obviously we can't go into working out, there's a lot of work involved in going into real detail on even any of them, but trying to give people an idea around if you went for option 4 and type 4, there is a significant additional capital cost over option number 2. And so we'll definitely highlight some of those capital costs and potential impacts, both from a positive and negative point of view, so that they've got some context. But you're right, to get really into the detail and or depending on where the community sentiment lands, there might need to be there's another round of real probably detailed, I guess, analysis, for lack of a better term, to inform some of that potentially.
Yeah, I think if you come out with 1 or 2 that are clear, then maybe there needs to be far more detail. And look, I'd just like to make sure that not just capital costs, and these are linked, but the airspace management costs and implications are linked in there as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, just we don't quite know where round 2 is going to go, so we don't want to jump the gun on that one, and we'll let the feedback dictate how we present the scenarios. Of course, going through the process properly. But my gut feels telling me we're not going to be coming, back in October, November to council saying there's only one scenario that that this process is saying we should progress with. And that might have been the thinking when this piece of work was first commissioned. The outcome will be one scenario that the golden bullet, and that's what we'll do. We might have more than one. Is what I'm saying.
Yeah, we might, but it would be nice to think. I mean, as this drags on, apologies to you, but it does cost more. If we can provide as much information as we can, and if there's the opportunity to get to a clear scenario in the first round, that saves money and saves time. So it might be something to aim for, if not something to settle on.
Can I just have one quick last bit?
Lisa?
Oh, sorry,
Thank you. Just wondering in the next round of submissions and questions through to the community, is there thinking that there should be an acknowledgement of the commercial impacts if you choose option 3, 4 and 5, that they want small aircraft, but the only way to realistically make it work for commercial operators is to enable tourism to happen as well. So there is going to be that trade-off. So if they want to have option 3 or option 4, I think it is, those domestic links, that also comes with a fish hook, which is you have to enable tourism as well. Is that something that?
Yeah, well, we're going to try and, I guess, highlight as much of the implications as we can around some of those themes, and there'll be links to, I guess, some of the key themes that we saw in the start of it. I guess we'll probably try and, there'll be costs, but also potentially tourism impacts / environmental impacts, and we're just trying to exactly iron that out, whether it's like a little colour coded or a wee bit of context. But if you go for full international airport, obviously there's a huge tourism and cost and everything, potentially right through to closing the airport with 0 impact. So yeah, just trying to provide that.
Option 5 is implied, right? But I think option 3.
Yeah, 3 and 4. And there are differences between those, and we'll try and highlight the fact that obviously connections with Auckland and because there's two ways you look. Obviously, it will enable more tourism, but you actually need to encourage more tourism to actually make that a viable option.
Feasible, yeah.
So there's potentially there's a double way to look at that. Yeah.
Okay, good luck.
Lisa?
I was just going to say, when we do that scenario stuff with the engagement, do you do much global best practice exampling? And I'm just coaching.
We will try and have some examples and I guess we tried to pull some of the ideas we put in there from things we see at other airports around the world.
I'm going to give a vote for Cochin and India's whole move into carbon zero airports. They've had 20 airports in India, had really good global standards.
Yeah.
And Cochin's India's first fully powered by solar energy. I went on a bit of an infrastructure study tour, which the flavour of the month of my family. Airports was a hot topic in India, looking at their regenerative practices. So I'd just like to give them a cheer for how well they've done, ticked off India's airports everywhere.
With that as well, New Zealand is actually an industry leader with airports being quite regenerative and meeting zero emissions. And Aegis operates airports globally, had the first carbon neutral airport in Africa. So this is something on our agenda and will be part of this for round 2 as well.
If Delhi can go carbon zero, I want to bring Queenstown can, right?
Okay. That's up to you. Brilliant. Thanks, team. Thank you. Yeah, and we'll see you in a few months.
Sorry,
we've got a 15-minute break before the next one. So, yeah, what a pass.
Kia ora. I'll just start off by introducing Andrew Hart. So Andy joined in September last year, and he is our operations and contracts manager for Three Waters. He's doing a great job bringing his experience from the contractor side to our contract management practices. And the purpose of today is a briefing around our procurement approach for the next district-wide Three Waters operation and maintenance contract. And so, we'll run through what we're doing and then an opportunity for questions at the end.
Over to me?
Yep, go for it.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. So we're currently with Veolia Water as our provider. Their contract does conclude on the 30th of June 2027, which sounds a long way away, but in contracting, it's pretty much going to come up very, very quickly. So we need to start to look at procurement ideas for the next contract. The current contract is a 3917 contract with a target cost. Current budget's around 11.5 million, but as assets keep getting added to our network, we'll probably see a year-to-year increase on that, depending on the amount of assets coming online and the maintenance of those assets. The scope of the contract, as it says up on our screen, is treatment plants and network operations, a large preventative maintenance contract, and corrective maintenance, obviously reactive works, compliance, sampling and reporting, and there's some specialist asset inspection activities, including CCTV, and a small package of capital works for renewals. The current contract does exclude the Cardrona water and wastewater treatment plant, but we are probably looking to bring that within the contract. That's the new contract.
So those two schemes are the product and design, build, operate type arrangements. So we're trying to align those to run to the same conclusion and commencement date for the next contract. And just one other point to remind the group around, this contract has already had an extraordinary extension. So through the previous reform, we extended by 4 years, 2 + 1 + 1. Unfortunately, that reform didn't happen, and here we are.
The 1st of July 2027 was meant to be when, was it entity D was meant to kick in?
Well, it was 25, so we were trying to give them 2 years after establishment.
Yeah.
It's amazing how time flies.
Yeah. All those discussions are coming back to me.
Yeah. So yeah, we should have been doing this in 23.
So,
sorry,
keep going, sorry.
Questions at the end. So we need to engage with some contracting partners who can deliver a contract that is going to, I say, deliver a really good customer service, prioritise health and safety, water drinking compliance, environmental protection. One of the big problems that our current contractor has is to retain skilled staff around the area for certain reasons. So we need a good contractor that can offer their staff good remuneration and good prospects. So we need to engage with those and take ownership of that, along with the maintenance of our existing network and preventative maintenance of our assets. So there's a lot of information that needs to come from them. That's our asset data quality and needs to improve, and this will give us a great opportunity to engage with the successful contractor and make sure that the information that we're getting back from them actually optimises our network. So.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that challenge around attracting and retaining staff. It has really been probably the biggest issue with the current contract. And so we need to front foot that in our procurement to make sure the contractors understand the uniqueness of our district, the cost of living, and see how we can work together and see what innovations contractors can put forward to give us confidence that whatever team they propose in the bid, we can have certainty that that team or similar calibre individuals will continue throughout the lifespan of the contract, particularly when we're talking about these O&M contracts which are long duration.
So some of the key considerations that we'll need to take into account when we are procuring a new or possibly retaining our existing contractor. Section 17A review, local water done well.
Yeah, I'll just talk about quickly. So we haven't done a Section 17A review in this case because of all the work that's gone on through the local water done well, and considering the options under that program of work. So basically under the LGA there is the ability to say that it's not cost effective to undertake a Section 17A review, and we have pointed to the previous work to suggest to draw conclusions around the opportunities for collaboration in that space.
But we've also, and I think rightly so, said that the whole water reform program of the last Labor government and this government effectively is a form of 17A review.
Correct.
It gets right through to how it's delivered, how it's procured, the whole works. And I have a funny feeling that under the regulatory services bill, there's some changes to 17A. I thought there was some talk of it being actually removed.
Not sure,
but anyway.
I heard that too.
But I think, I mean, the bigger point is we've gone through, well, the whole country's gone through an entire 17A review.
We didn't think there was value in doing it again.
We want to consider what type of contracting model we want to put forward, and as we've listed there are several different types. Previously I've worked in collaborative contracts and cost plus contracts. Each one has their positives and negatives, unfortunately, so we'll be discussing that to see which one model actually suits our...
Well, so yeah, the procurement plan is recommending a model, and so we are looking to provide something that's consistent. We'll get to it in a moment with what we currently have, and again, consistent with the parks contract, the roading contract. We're not seeing significant value to be gained by going through an alliance or a full collaborative contract, but there are opportunities to bring in collaboration into these more traditional contract mechanisms models.
We'll look at the scope of the contract, obviously with the amount of new assets coming on board. There may be some specialisation skills that we might want to possibly look to bring in-house in the future. Sorry, my screen's just going to black out there. So that gives us again the opportunity to look at that. And as any major contractor who will probably tender for the work, they like to have a longer duration to start the contract. So one of future starts will probably look for a 5 plus 2 plus 2, which we've got. 3 plus 3. 3 plus 3. Yeah, the longer it is, it makes it more appealing for a sort of a tier 1 or tier 2 contractor.
Yeah, certainly more attractive when there's a longer term, encourages them to invest in the tender and then the contract that follows. So
the proposed model will be 3917 on the target cost. As I said there, it utilises a combination of lump sum remuneration and day works, which is what we currently do. We are looking at possibly 2 separable portions. The reason for that, treatment plants and complex assets, we feel that there's an opportunity to go to market because we feel that there are now specialist companies that are coming into New Zealand that can offer that specialisation of contracting, especially in treatment plants. ReTech network that may also offer the opportunity for some smaller tier 2 contractors to come into the role, basically for minor and repair work on our existing network. So that may be, we may get some value for money at that as well.
Yeah, completely. So the intent is to go through 2 separate portions under one contract. So there's an option that if Fulton Hogan Downers, the tier 1 city care, want to bid both and can demonstrate value for having the scale of the full engagement, they have that opportunity, but also doesn't preclude specialists or tier 2 contractors putting forward bids for just one aspect that they feel they can deliver, but they can't take on the whole thing. So it's kind of a best of both worlds situation, in our opinion.
Similar to the procurement strategy for the Harley pipeline that went under 2.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is actually the same approach the QLDC ended up taking. Yeah. And their experience is quite interesting because their key driver in doing it was to try and, as I understand, enable access to market for the lower tier contractors by separating out the ReTech. But what actually happened is they got a treatment specialist who picked up the treatment aspect, and then Fulton Hogan picked up the balance. So they got a different outcome, which still brought some positives. It's created then challenges for us because Trilogy has then looked at the broader region to see where they can resource the contract from. Sorry, back to you, Andy.
Okay, yeah. The renewal scope is available based on performance and tender pricing. So there will be a suite of KPIs in the contract, and we're very keen to make sure that any underperformance could result in a loss of term because we don't want to reward bad performance. So that will be very key that all contractors will be very aware of before or during any negotiations. Like Simon said, the term we're currently going to propose is a 5 plus 3 plus 3, which gives some certainty around some longevity on the contract, especially for the larger contractors.
Yeah, and that's aligned with the roading contract, and that last 3 year rather than a 2 to get to 10 is so that we have sufficient time to procure the next contract. We're finding these exercises are more and more protracted, just the amount of effort and data to manage to get in a position to tender. 3 years is far more comfortable than 2.
And the network's getting bigger.
And I just need to call out that I've updated the value on the screen. Spotted an error and based on communication with finance, the number is slightly more than the pack that you had.
That's across the whole 11 years.
Yes, that's across the 11 years.
Unfloated just
Yep, so that number is a lot bigger if you apply 3% and 3% on it.
3.3.
Yep.
So Simon, how with the 5 plus 3 plus 3, does this novate over to a water services?
So we'll just be putting in an innovation clause for any point. Potentially this contract, in all likelihood, this contract may never actually be awarded to, QLDC may never be the principal to this contract. Yeah.
There's no issue though with having an 11-year contract potentially set up before
new entity is even.
So we're just going to have to be part of the transfer agreement, and we cannot afford to not do it. We've already extended this contract once.
Our entity as well, and there's a certain comfort level that the entity has a pathway for a contractor.
Just be glad that we're not like a group of three with all three different contractors all coming together.
Finishing off with timeframes. So one of the most important things, and talking from experience, is that once the contract is awarded, if a new contractor is successful in the bid, it's the timescales for those contractors to integrate all their IT skills and IT information into our IT systems, which seems to take forever, can take up to 1 year just to get that over the line. So when I said at the start, we're looking at July 2027, it seems a long way away, but when you actually work your way back and reverse engineer it out, it's going to come up very, very quickly. We're already up against some time. Tender documents we're preparing now. So we've got until February to get those completed. And we said the RFTs in March, and the close will be June, and then hopefully award in October, if not sooner possibly, for commencement on the 1st of July.
Great. So 9 months of that establishment period, which is really the minimum that we want. So if we can move things forward, we look at those opportunities. And we're currently working through a procurement process to bring on a subject matter expert and consultant support with drafting the tender documents. That's in final negotiations, if not awarded already.
And then we're on to questions, but
that is our story.
Questions?
I've got a few little ones. Just back to the Cadrona. Just remind me what's happening there. You're trying to integrate that into this contract or not?
So yeah, the Cadrona plants will come in. So currently the network is within Veolia's scope, but the two treatment plants are not. They are operated by the constructor of those projects. So that's with Apex and Water currently. But yeah, the intent is to have a scope that incorporates the full district.
Okay. Are there any other outside contracts outside of Veolia that you deal with on this for water? What about stormwater? I don't know, I'm trying to understand where
so stormwater is inclusive. It is a 3 waters contract, not a 2 waters contract. The contracts we have outside of this, we have one around operational technology for the radio network. So that's with a local provider, with CountryNet. And we have a contract with SJ Allen for the cartage of biosolids to AB Line.
Okay. With the, you mentioned the radio IT type side of it, you mentioned at the end there, with the transfer of contracts. Now, who owns the intellectual property rights on the radio, all the radio stuff and the technology?
So that the operational technology, the OT is separate. So I guess we've got this contract for the radio network. So that's owned by CountryNet and managed by that third-party provider. We then own the radios and equipment on each of the facility assets, so the pump stations, treatment plants, that then communicates over that architecture. What Andy was more talking about is actually the IT aspect around the asset management systems. So currently we have Tech One as our asset management system, and also our job management system for requests called in by the public. And that has to integrate into the contractor's system. So that integration is complex and takes a lot of time. And there's also a push of information back from the contractor's asset management system into ours. And it's those integrations that are really time consuming and challenging.
Yeah.
We are really having a good look. Alison Tomlinson and her team are doing some enhancement work around our use of Tech One, and there could be an opportunity to actually make our asset management system available for the contractors to work in directly, and whether we mandate that or provide that as an option is still something that we're working through, because that would streamline some of those data flows and give us a whole lot more certainty around what data we get and control over it.
The last one was on the page. You mentioned renewable scope available based on performance and tender pricing. Just trying to understand what that means. Renewable scope, surely renewables is really important, obviously, but the.
So we have a budget, I think this year's budget's about $7 million, where we do spend quite a lot of money through the contractor, the operations contractor, because it is an efficient delivery mechanism, but we don't want to make that by right. We want to
you could use other contractors to do that.
Correct. So we go out to market for some of the small renewals. We deliver some through the contract. So,
Understood, thank you.
We get best value for money doing it that way.
Yeah.
Sorry?
We get best value for money.
Yeah.
Doing it that way.
Yeah. Okay. In the procurement plan, we're nominally allocating about $5 million of that. That's what we see as the ceiling of what we put through this contract, but it doesn't need to be that much, and it would be performance-based and value-driven.
Thank you.
Nikki?
Thanks, Glenn. Yeah, we're obviously having a workshop now and tender documentation prepared February 26th. What's the next steps for councillor involvement in this?
That's a great question. I should have introduced that at the start. So you will be seeing the procurement plan on the 4th of September.
Perfect. Thank you. That's great.
And I think.
Sorry, can you just elaborate on that? So we're seeing it in what forum we're doing?
So that is for a decision to approve.
Decision to approve on September 4th. Thank you.
I thought you were going to ask about after that, when would it come back to council after the tenders have been received? Just get awarded.
Yeah, so we will be seeking the delegation to award.
Yeah.
Have we gone, sorry?
Just a quick one. So you mentioned before about the likelihood that the contract would, the QLDC would never be the principal for it, it would go straight to the CCO. But obviously, I think what you're saying as well is that if the CCO is delayed, that it could equally be still operated.
Yeah, we'll be preparing this contract that QLDC is the principal, but it could novate on day one, effectively, or earlier.
Okay. And the only other question I had was, am I correct in thinking that the total operational expenditure for operating our three waters is about $40 million a year?
Yeah, it's somewhere in that, but a little bit less than that. Yeah,
37, 36.
So, but that includes electricity, insurances, staff time, interest payments. Yeah.
Thanks.
Through this existing contract, have we done any harmonisation of pumps and types of?
We already have.
Or does that continue on? Because I know at one stage we had a different contract for Lake Hayes Estate.
Yep.
Different equipment and all sorts. Is that all sort of slowly being tidied up?
Yeah, like
getting off topic.
The council has an approved materials list. We've got preferred suppliers for pumps and instruments. So we are continually trying to hone down on those whilst also keeping some competition available. So we still find odds and sods occasionally and trying to wean them out, but yeah, we are getting better.
Yeah, we do have a pump register with every pump listed by manufacturer.
Yeah.
And then when a pump needs to be replaced, we tend to go to certain suppliers with types of pumps rather than have a suite of that need different parts. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and trying to rationalise spares. You've got pumps that can fit into multiple wells, even if they're not the perfect duty, as a spare.
And there still seems to be a backlog from COVID, believe it or not, of trying to get spares. But we've been out to China and it's like 4 to 6 months to wait for spares. It's just not good enough. So we're trying to tone that down as well. So.
All good?
Quick one. Back to the skilled staffing. I know you said they're going to have to front foot it. Is there any muttering out there or feelings out there with all these, shall I say it, local water done well? There's going to be obviously big demands of moving staff around for the CCO down the road here, or our one, and or around the country. Is there, I don't know, is there any sort of feeling that's going to
change? The industry is already under pressure at a kind of workforce level. I think what the CCO is going to change is it's going to put demand on boards and CEs, and
that's that Sun's contract, not this contract.
No. I just want to get a feel for it.
So Simon, just on that, because I mean a large part of the more complex networks are outsourced to specialist contractors anyway. So there's not there's not a huge residual amount of local workforce and councils in this sort of field as they, so it's the whole nature of specialisation and sort of basically doing what we do best in the market to do what it does best for us. And that's right around the country increasingly, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think just going back to a point Andy introduced is, another reason for trying to separate those two separate portions and have treatment and the complex aspects pulled out is it actually enables a pathway if the CCO or future water entities want to explore and bringing those skills back in-house. So if you look at the Watercare example, they deliver treatment in-house, and it's far easier to build a career progression if you're in control of it, and to try and build that capacity.
Several councils do that.
Yeah, there is a number. So
DCC,
Dunedin, Rotorua, Taupo, there are quite a few, and that's my read of the future. As you see a desire to take ownership of that.
Ownership of the technical plant as opposed to just the networks.
Correct.
Yeah. So not the pipe networks, not the stormwater channels, it's the technical plant.
It's the complex, high risk, high consequence.
Good. Cheers, team.
Thank you very much. Always a pleasure.
My nervousness.